What if the greatest battle you will ever fight is not the one the world can see? What if the giant standing before you, the one whose shadow has fallen across your whole life, the one whose voice you hear in the quiet hours when you cannot sleep, was never meant to be conquered by your strength at all, but only by your surrender to a God who fights for those who have nothing left but faith? This is the story of a shepherd boy and a giant, but it is also the story of every soul that has ever stood at the edge of a valley, trembling while everyone around them insisted the battle was already lost. It is a story about the giants we cannot defeat and the God who specializes in the impossible. The Valley of Elah stretched between two ridges of pale stone, a long scar in the body of the earth where two armies had gathered to decide the fate of a nation. It was a place of olive groves and terebinth trees, of a dry brook winding through the bottom, where shepherds once watered their flocks in peace. But there was no peace now. On one slope camped the Philistines, sea peoples, ironworkers, masters of war whose forges guarded the secret of weapons Israel could not match. They had chariots and iron and a confidence born of victories. On the other slope camped the army of Israel under King Saul, the tall man who had once stood head and shoulders above his countrymen, the king the people had begged for, the king who was now afraid. The morning air carried the smell of cooking fires, of unwashed men, of horses and leather and bronze, and beneath it all, the metallic tang of fear. For fear has a scent, and it had settled over the camp of Israel like a fog that would not lift. For 40 days, twice a day, at dawn and at dusk, the same terror unfolded. He came out from the ranks of the Philistines like a moving wall of bronze, Goliath of Gath. 6 cubits and a span, nearly 10 feet of muscle and menace. His bronze helmet caught the morning light and threw it back in a hard glare. His coat of scale armor weighed 5,000 shekels of bronze, the plates overlapping like the hide of some primeval beast that should have died with the old world. Bronze greaves covered his legs. A bronze javelin was slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and the iron head alone weighed 600 shekels, heavier than most men could lift. Before him walked a shield bearer, as if this monster needed protecting, as if anything in Israel could touch him. He planted his feet in the floor of the valley, and the earth seemed to brace beneath him. He lifted his voice, and it rolled across the camp of Israel like thunder rolling down from the mountains. "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." Then he sneered, and the words dripped with contempt that reached every ear across the valley. "I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." And not a single soldier moved. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. The king who stood taller than any man in Israel sat frozen in his tent, his great sword resting useless against the wall. Seasoned warriors stared at the ground, suddenly fascinated by the dust at their feet. The bravest among them felt their courage drain away into the earth. For Goliath was not merely a man. He was the embodiment of everything impossible, every obstacle too large to overcome, every enemy too powerful to defeat. Every fear that has ever whispered to a human heart that it would be better to surrender than to fight. This was the silence of a people who had forgotten their God. They could count the giant's height. They could measure his spear, but they had lost the ability to remember the one who had parted seas and toppled walls and delivered them again and again. Their eyes were full of the giant, and so their hearts were empty of faith. Many miles away, in the hills around Bethlehem, a young man tended his father's flock, unaware that his life was about to collide with destiny. David was the youngest of 8 sons of Jesse, the forgotten one, the one left in the fields while his older brothers marched off to war with their spears and their pride. He was ruddy, with beautiful eyes and a handsome face. But more than that, though no one yet knew it but God himself, he was a man after God's own heart. Years before, when the prophet Samuel had come to Jesse's house to anoint a king from among his sons, David had not even been summoned in from the fields. His own father had not thought to call him. Yet it was David whom God had chosen, David upon whose head the oil had been poured, David upon whom the Spirit of the Lord had rushed. The one the world overlooked was the one heaven had already crowned. The work of the fields was lonely. Long days beneath a merciless sun, longer nights beneath a vast canopy of stars that turned slowly overhead while the flock slept. And in that solitude, David had learned what the soldiers in the valley had forgotten. He had learned that when a lion came out of the thicket to steal a lamb, you did not run. He had pursued it, struck it down, and torn the lamb from its very mouth. When a bear rose against him, he had seized it by its fur and killed it with his bare hands. He had felt the hot breath of death on his face and had not flinched, because he had learned that the Lord who delivered him from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear was a God who shows up in the very moment of greatest danger, when there is no one else and no other hope. He had learned to sing to that God. With nothing but a harp and the open sky, David poured out his heart in songs that would one day become the prayers of millions. "The Lord is my shepherd," he sang into the darkness. "I shall not want." He had no idea he was writing words that would outlast empires, words that would be whispered by the dying and sung by the grieving for 3,000 years. And in those quiet hours, his faith grew not weaker, but stronger, like a root system spreading deep beneath the soil where no human eye could see. Character is forged in private long before it is displayed in public. And while the soldiers in the valley had been building their fear, David had been building his faith. Then his father called him in from the fields. Jesse was anxious for his 3 eldest sons, who had followed Saul to war and sent back no word. "Take this grain and these 10 loaves to your brothers," he told David, "and hurry to the camp. Carry these 10 cheeses to the commander of their 1,000. See how your brothers are and bring back some token from them." So David rose early, left the sheep with a keeper, and traveled the long road down to the Valley of Elah, carrying provisions and carrying, without knowing it, the hope of a nation in his unremarkable hands. He did not march like a soldier. He came like an errand boy, a younger brother sent with bread and cheese, the least likely deliverer the world had ever seen. He arrived just as the army was marching out to its battle line, shouting the war cry. For one brief moment, David must have felt the thrill of it, the ranks of Israel arrayed for battle, the banners snapping in the wind, the roar of men preparing to fight for their God. His heart must have lifted at the sight. Surely, he thought, these are the armies of the living God, and surely God will give them the victory. He left his provisions with the keeper of the baggage and ran toward the lines to greet his brothers. And then Goliath stepped forward again. The same defiance, the same booming challenge, the same words David's ears had never heard, but his heart instantly recognized as blasphemy. And David watched, stunned, as the men of Israel, grown men, armed men, trained warriors, fled from the giant in terror. He watched them break and scatter like sheep before a wolf. He saw the fear in their faces, the shame in their eyes. And something rose up within him that he could not contain. The men of Israel said to one another, "Have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. The king will enrich the man who kills him with great riches and will give him his daughter and make his father's house free in Israel." David turned to the men beside him, and his question cut through the fear like a blade through cloth. "What shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God?" The living God. There it was. While everyone else saw only the size of the giant, David saw only the smallness of the giant compared to the God of Israel. The others measured Goliath against themselves and despaired. David measured Goliath against the Almighty and was unimpressed. To the soldiers, this was a contest between a man and a monster. To David, it was a contest between a loud-mouthed pagan and the God who flung the stars into space. The math was not even close. But his words did not inspire everyone. They angered some. His oldest brother Eliab heard him speaking to the men, and his anger burned hot. Perhaps it was jealousy. Eliab had been passed over by Samuel after all, the tall and impressive son whom even the prophet had assumed would be king. Perhaps it was the sting of a younger brother showing a courage the older brother lacked. "Why have you come down here?" he demanded, his voice sharp with scorn. "And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and the evil of your heart, for you have come down only to see the battle." It was a cruel accusation, designed to shrink David back down to size. Just a shepherd boy, just the youngest, just a nuisance who should mind his few sheep and stay out of the affairs of men. It is often this way, that the fiercest opposition to our faith comes not from the giant in front of us, but from those closest to us, those who cannot bear to see us believe what they have given up believing. But David had learned long ago not to find his worth in the words of those who underestimated him. "What have I done now?" he said simply. "Was it not but a word?" And he turned away, refusing to be drawn into the quarrel, and asked others the same question. The giant in the valley had not silenced him. His own brother would not silence him either. Word of the strange young man and his bold questions spread through the camp until it reached the ears of King Saul. And Saul, desperate for any hope, for any thread to cling to, sent for him. When David stood before the king, he made a declaration that must have sounded like the ravings of a madman. "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." Saul looked at the boy before him, young, slight, unscarred by battle, and saw exactly what everyone else saw: "You are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him." The king said almost gently, "For you are but a youth, and he has been a man of war from his youth. You are a boy, he is a killer. This is not bravery, this is suicide." But David was not looking at himself. He had stopped looking at himself a long time ago. He was looking at the track record of his God. "Your servant used to keep sheep for his father," he said, "and when there came a lion or a bear and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and struck him and delivered it out of his mouth. And if he arose against me, I caught him by his beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God." He was not boasting, he was testifying. Every word was a memory of a moment when God had shown up. And then came the words that revealed the secret of his confidence, the foundation on which his whole strange courage was built. "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear," he said, "will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." This was not the bravado of a foolish boy who did not understand the danger. This was the settled, unshakable faith of a young man who had already seen God prove himself faithful in the unseen places, in the lonely fields where no one was watching and no one would ever know. David's courage in public was the fruit of his communion in private. The battles he won where no one could see had prepared him for the battle the whole world would witness. God had been training him in obscurity for a moment of glory he could not yet imagine. Saul looked at him a long moment, and then he relented. "Go," he said, "and the Lord be with you." Then the king tried to do the only thing he knew how to do. He tried to make David into a smaller version of himself. He clothed David in his own armor. And remember, Saul was the tallest man in Israel, so the armor swallowed the boy whole. A bronze helmet on his head, a heavy coat of mail on his body. He fastened his own sword at David's side. And David tried to walk and could not. He staggered under the weight of it. "I cannot go with these," David said, "for I have not tested them." There is a profound truth buried in that quiet sentence. David could not fight the giant in another man's armor. He could not win Saul's battle using Saul's methods, with Saul's weapons, in Saul's strength. The armor that was meant to protect him would only have gotten him killed. He had to face this enemy as himself, with the simple weapons God had spent years teaching him to use in the wilderness, in the school of solitude where no one applauds. So he took off the armor. He let it fall to the ground, all that bronze and iron, all that human protection, and he stepped away from it free. He took his staff in his hand and walked down to the brook that ran through the valley floor, and he chose 5 smooth stones from the stream bed. The cool water tumbled over the stones, worn smooth by years of patient current, polished by the very hand of God for a purpose they could not know. David selected them carefully, weighing each one, and placed them in his shepherd's pouch. His sling was in his hand, the same sling he had used 1,000 times against predators in the hills, and he drew near to the Philistine. Down in the valley, Goliath came forward, his shield-bearer marching before him. And when the giant looked and saw David, saw the smooth-faced youth with no armor, no sword, no spear, only a shepherd's staff and a sling, a slow contempt spread across his face. This was an insult. This was a mockery. They had sent him a child.
"Am I a dog," he roared, "that you come to me with sticks?"
And the giant cursed David by his gods, by Dagon and all the demons of Philistia.
"Come to me,"
he bellowed,
"and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the field."
He had killed 100 men. This one would not even slow him down. The whole valley held its breath. 2 armies watched from the slopes above, leaning forward, straining to see. On one side stood 10 feet of armored death, a lifetime of warfare, the terror of nations, every advantage of size and strength and experience. On the other side stood a young shepherd with a sling and a heart on fire with the glory of God. Never had 2 combatants seemed so unequal. Never had the outcome seemed so certain. And David opened his mouth, and what came out was not a battle cry, not a scream of fear, but a sermon that would echo for 3,000 years.
"You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin," he declared, his young voice ringing clear across the valley. "But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead bodies of the host of the Philistines this day to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel." Then came the words that explain everything. The words that turn this from a story about a clever underdog into a story about the power of God Himself. "And that all this assembly may know that the Lord saves not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and He will give you into our hand." The battle is the Lord's. There it was, the truest sentence in the whole story. David never believed it was his fight to win. He never imagined the victory depended on his strength, his aim, his courage. He believed it was God's fight, and he was merely the willing instrument in the hand of a faithful God. He came not to win glory for himself, but to vindicate the name of the one the giant had blasphemed. And then there was no more talk. The giant lumbered forward, his bronze flashing in the sun, the ground trembling beneath his enormous weight, his shield-bearer scrambling to keep pace. This was the moment. And David did not retreat. David did not even hold his ground. David ran. He ran toward the battle line, toward the giant, toward the impossible, his feet flying over the valley floor. As he ran, his hand moved with the ease of long practice. He reached into his pouch and took out a single stone. He fitted it into the pocket of his sling, and with the practiced motion of 10,000 hours in the lonely fields, the motion that had become as natural to him as breathing, he whirled it around his head, faster and faster, and released. The stone flew true. It crossed the distance in a heartbeat and struck the Philistine on his forehead, in the one place the armor did not cover, the one small target the size of a coin. It sank deep into his skull. For one terrible, frozen moment, the giant swayed, a look of dull surprise crossing his enormous face. And then Goliath of Gath, the terror of Israel, the champion of the Philistines, the man who had defied the living God for 40 days, toppled and fell face down on the ground. The earth shook one last time as he landed, and then he was still. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him.
There was no sword in the hand of David. He ran forward and stood over the fallen giant. And having no sword of his own, he reached down and drew Goliath's own massive blade from its sheath, a sword so heavy David could barely lift it, and finished what the stone had begun, and cut off the giant's head with the giant's own weapon. The enemy was defeated by the very thing he had trusted to destroy the servant of God. The weapon meant for slaughter became the instrument of his own undoing. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, the unbeatable one, the invincible one, lying headless in the dust before a boy, they were seized with panic and fled. And the men of Israel and Judah rose up with a great shout and pursued them across the valley and through the gates of their cities. The same men who moments before had cowered in their tents, paralyzed and ashamed, were now emboldened, transformed, set free. The fear that had held an entire army captive for 40 days was shattered in a single instant by one act of faith from one young man who believed his God. David carried the head of Goliath to Jerusalem, but he kept the giant's weapons in his tent, reminders not of his own strength, but of the day the Lord proved before all the earth that he saves not with sword and spear. The shepherd had become a giant slayer. The forgotten son had become the hope of a nation. The errand boy who came with bread and cheese went home with the head of a giant and a name that would never be forgotten. And the world learned once again that God delights in choosing the foolish things to shame the wise, and the weak things to shame the strong, and the things that are not, to bring to nothing the things that are, so that no flesh might ever glory in his presence. But this story is far more than the triumph of an underdog. If we read it only as a tale of courage rewarded, of the little guy who beat the odds, we miss its deepest meaning entirely. The story is not finally about David's bravery at all. It is about a pattern God was weaving into history, a shadow of something greater still to come. Look closely at the valley one more time. An entire people, helpless, paralyzed by an enemy they could not defeat, facing a doom they could not escape. They needed a champion, one man to stand in their place, to fight the battle they could not fight, to win the victory they could not win. And the outcome of the whole conflict rested not on the people, but entirely on the representative who went out in their name. If he won, they all won. If he lost, they were all lost. One man stood for many. One man's victory became the victory of all. This is the gospel hidden in the Valley of Elah. For we too were trapped in a valley, facing an enemy far greater than Goliath, the giants of sin and death, the ancient accuser whose defiance has echoed across all the ages, an enemy no human strength could ever overcome. We stood paralyzed, condemned, unable to lift a hand to save ourselves. We had no champion among us, not one. And so heaven sent one down. And one came, not in bronze armor, not with sword and spear, but in the humility of human flesh, wrapped in the weakness of a body like ours. Where David was the youngest son sent by his earthly father, Jesus was the beloved Son sent by the eternal Father into a world at war. Where David came down from the hills of Bethlehem, Jesus came down from the courts of heaven to that same little town of Bethlehem, the city of David, born among the very hills where the shepherd once kept his flock. Where David faced the giant with 5 smooth stones, Jesus faced the full fury of the powers of darkness with nothing but obedience and love. And here is the great and beautiful mystery. David won his battle by striking the enemy down, but Jesus won his battle by being struck down himself. The true champion went down into the valley and was wounded for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. He fell, face down, in a garden called Gethsemane, sweating drops like blood beneath the olive trees. He climbed a hill called Calvary, carrying not a sling, but a cross upon his torn shoulders. And there, where the watching world saw only defeat and shame and the end of everything, God was winning the greatest victory of all time. For when the stone was rolled away 3 days later, and the morning light spilled into an empty tomb, death itself lay defeated, like a giant face down in the dust. And the risen champion stood over the enemy that had terrorized humanity since the Garden of Eden, and stripped it of its weapons, and crushed the serpent's head beneath his heel. By his death, he destroyed the one who held the power of death, and freed all those who through fear of death had been subject to lifelong slavery. The grave was emptied. The accuser was silenced. The battle was won forever. And just as David's victory became the victory of all Israel without one soldier lifting a sword, so Christ's victory becomes the victory of all who trust in him. We did not fight. We could not fight. We could only watch and believe. But our champion fought for us, and bled for us, and conquered for us. And his triumph is now and forever our triumph. This is why the story of David and Goliath still matters for you, today, right where you are. You have a giant. Everyone does. Perhaps it is a diagnosis that came back worse than you feared, a word from a doctor that changed everything in an instant. Perhaps it is an addiction that has held you in chains for years, a thing you have fought and lost to more times than you can count. Perhaps it is grief that visits you faithfully every dawn and every dusk, like Goliath in the valley, taunting you, telling you that the battle is already lost and you may as well lie down. Perhaps it is anxiety that steals your sleep, or shame that follows you like a shadow, or a sin you cannot seem to defeat no matter how hard you try, or a circumstance so much larger than you that you have stopped even trying to fight it. And the world will tell you to face it the way Saul wanted David to, armored in your own strength, fighting with your own weapons, trusting in your own ability and your own willpower and your own cleverness. But that armor will only weigh you down and slow your steps and leave you crushed. You cannot defeat your giants in your own power, any more than David could fight in Saul's borrowed armor. Take it off. Let it fall. The lesson of the valley is not that you are stronger than you think. That is the lie the world loves to tell. The real lesson is far better than that. Your God is greater than your giant. The battle is not yours to win. The battle is the Lord's. So run toward your giant the way David did, not in your own name, but in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of heaven. Remember the lions and the bears, the smaller battles God has already brought you through, in the lonely places where no one else was watching, and no one will ever know. Let those private victories give you public courage. Remember every time he has shown up before, and let it convince you he will show up again. And know this for certain: the same God who delivered David, the same God who raised Jesus from the grave on the third day, is the God who fights for you still, and he has never lost a battle. The giant standing before you today is not the end of your story. It is the stage on which God intends to display his power for all to see. The thing that looks like your defeat may be the very place of your deliverance.
Because God is still writing stories of redemption today.
Still choosing the overlooked and the forgotten. Still empowering the weak and the small. Still toppling the things that seemed unconquerable. Still using the bread carriers and the shepherd boys to shame the giants of this world. The stone is already in his hand, and the champion who went down into the valley for you has already won. May you never again look at your giant and forget your God. If this story stirred something in you, please consider subscribing. These videos take a great deal of time and love to make, and your support helps us keep telling these timeless stories of faith. Until next time, may you walk in the courage of the one who has already won your battle.